Welcome to another episode of Chattin with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill-Staxx, and today I got Scott Burnstein. What's up, man?
How you doing, brother?
I'm good. So I've seen you a lot on different documentaries, and you're on quite a few, man. And a couple books, I think.
Yeah,
You,
I've
you
written
have,
I've written 6 books. I've produced um, something like 5 documentaries, and I run my Gangster Report website, which is kind of like I consider it like the Rolling Stone magazine of the underworld.
yeah,
Um, I know I got a pretty big following from wise guys from across the country as well as law enforcement.
yeah,
Um, So it's a labor of love. I'm passionate about telling great stories. Uh, you know, my bread and butter is here in Detroit, where I'm from, and I kind of started off as the Detroit mob guy, and then branched off into telling stories about organized crime, families, and figures in Chicago, Philadelphia, New England, and I really enjoy doing it.
yeah. That's why I picked this genre, man. I love this genre. I've spoken to quite a few people that were in the life, and I like doing it, man. It's fun, and So what made you steer into that genre?
Well, a lot of people think that it's something that I've been interested in my whole life, or that I've been studying this or writing about it since I was either a young kid or a young man, and it's actually not true. And I didn't really get into studying this stuff or writing about it or trying to make myself an expert until my mid 20s when I was in law school. But ironically, I grew up around uh, some Jewish organized crime elements in the Detroit area that were deeply tied into the Giacalone crew, Tony and Billy Giacalone, who were the street bosses of the Detroit Mafia from the early 1960s into the 2000s. They were the guys that were responsible for the Jimmy Hoffa kidnapping and murder. Um, so I was unaware of who these guys were that my grandfather hung around. I was aware that I had a lineage in my grandpa's family to the Purple Gang,
Yeah,
Burnstein brothers, who were the founders and bosses of the Detroit Purple Gang, which was a Jewish Prohibition era mob that was or that is the most iconic outside of Jimmy Hoffa, probably the most iconic, or not probably, without doubt, without question, the most iconic Detroit gangland, symbol or era or group
yeah,
was the Purple Gang, and they were incredibly um, well chronicled, not just in Detroit, but around the globe. And they were shouted out in Elvis Presley songs and in James Bond novels. And um, they were just ubiquitous at that time period. And in some ways, uh, it became a catch-all for any Detroit underworld activity. That if you were a mobster from Detroit before 1950, you were a part of the Purple Gang.
yeah.
And that's just
The Purple Gang.
unfortunately
That's
that's a fallacy. But
yeah. That the
so
picture
I
with they got their faces covered with their hats, right?
and now there's one famous picture of like 7 or 8 of them covering their face.
Yeah,
And in fact, I don't believe that picture was all purple gangers. I think that picture with them all having their fedoras in front of their face. I think that was a mix of purple gangers and river gangers. And another thing that sometimes gets lost in translation from people that are looking at the Detroit underworld from outside of Michigan is that the Detroit family unlike a lot of other families, when we're talking about an Italian mafia family, was incredibly inclusive, and they were an equal opportunity group. If you could make money for them, you could rise through the ranks. So the Jews and the Italians worked very closely together. The Middle Easterners and the Jews worked very closely together. The blacks and the Jews and the Italians all worked very closely together. Yeah, that's the photo.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of photos from the Prohibition era that have kind of a hodgepodge of different ethnic factions in the lineup photos together. There's a number that have purple gangers and Italians in it.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
They were working together even back then.
Yeah, if you can make money, then they're gonna
Right.
work with you.
So I grew up hearing stories about the Purple Gang and Meyer Lansky, who was linked to my family through my uncle Al, who was a descendant of the Purple Burnsteins. Al married Charlotte, my aunt Charlotte, who was Charlotte Garfield. Charlotte Garfield's father was Sammy Garfield, who was a very prominent Purple Gang member and was the Purple Gang's liaison to Meyer Lansky. Him and Lansky were childhood best friends, and Lansky had actually served as my aunt Charlotte's, godfather. And so
That's
there were a
pretty
lot of
crazy.
interactions between Meyer and my uncle Al and his whole family, and then obviously the Bernstein brothers. And when Ray Bernstein got out of prison in 1965, after serving 35 years on the Collins Massacre, which was kind of the beginning and the end of the Purple Gang, my family helped take care of him because he didn't have any family.
What was that? Did they killed a bunch of people?
Yeah, the Collins Massacre is kind of like the equivalent of what the St. Valentine's Day Massacre was to Capone, which, by the way, the Purple Gang was integral in pulling that off because they were allies with Capone and helped Capone pull off the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. But 2 years after the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in Detroit, they had what they called the Collins Massacre, which was the Purples had a subunit of bootleggers that were working for them. They were Chicago guys that had come to Detroit and were working on the river, and they were in charge of moving all the bootleg alcohol from Canada to the shores of Detroit in speedboats.
Yeah.
And they wanted to branch off and start their own group called the Little Jewish Navy. And the Purple Gangs weren't. The Purple Gang was not down with the the branch off idea, and they called the three leaders of the Little Jewish Navy to a meeting at the Collinwood Manor, which was like a hotel, boarding house, apartment building, and they gunned them all down in an apartment. There were three guys that were killed: Jaime Paul, Joe Leibowitz, and Izzy Sutzker. And so yeah, Ray went down for that, and was the only Bernstein brother out of the four Bernstein brothers to have to do significant prison time. But he did 35 years. Never
crazy.
got married.
Got out.
Never
That's
had
crazy.
kids. Yeah, got out. Only lived a couple years after he got out, and died cancer or syphilis. Can't remember exactly what killed
A lot of them died from that, huh? Syphilis back in the day.
So my grandpa and my uncle were friends with a lot of Jewish bookies and gamblers that were, ostensibly or on the periphery of the Giacalone crew. Some of them were more than just on the periphery. Some of them were, would be considered by the FBI Detroit mob associates, and one of them is actually a suspect in two mob murders tied to the Giacalone crew. So I was hanging around guys that were heavily involved, but as a kid, I had no idea they were just my grandpa's buddies. Guys that gambled. I mean, I knew they gambled, and I was interested in that because I was interested in kind of being around my grandpa, and I was a big sports fan, and I liked the fact that he, had the television on ESPN 24 hours a day, checking scores, and when he would get his newspaper, he would take his his pen and kind of go through the newspaper, noting the statistics for the
Probably all
players.
the bets he had.
Yeah, that he was betting, and he'd have a betting sheet when we go out. And,
Yeah.
But again, it didn't mean much to me. It didn't seem dangerous or nefarious or really having any. I didn't see any history to it. They were just, my grandpa's buddies, and the only time there were a couple times in my childhood where there were, I guess you could say, red flags. But I don't want to say red flags in terms of any danger, but just red flags maybe in acknowledging or recognizing that these friends of my grandpa's weren't your just everyday, ants marching. They weren't guys that were getting up at 7 a.m. and punching a clock at a factory, or they weren't, putting on a suit and tie and going down to a law firm or an accounting firm.
Yeah, they all got money.
Yeah,
They
they
all
were
got money, nice cars.
They were just kind of, like I said, they were just a colorful group of guys that hung around my grandpa. But one of the first episodes that happened where I knew that maybe these aren't the exact type of friends that my friends' grandpas might have had. They weren't, playing shuffleboard down in Del Boca Vista.
Yeah.
But when I was about 7, maybe 8-ish, one of my grandpa's best friends, a guy named Al Sandelman, who was mid-level bookmaker for the Jackalonis. They called him Farmer Al or Popcorn Al or Fat Al. And my grandpa would sometimes leave me with this. And and to this day, Al died, R.I.P. Al. I guess he died in a house fire. But, Al was great to me, and I loved Al. And I remember he used to make the best popcorn in the world. And he'd stuff, just give me popcorn balls and keep me happy when my grandpa was off doing whatever he was doing. But, Al showed up at my family's house. My dad's an attorney, and he had just gotten indicted by the feds for bookmaking and racketeering. And he was flipping out. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning. And I remember getting up, from my bed, being like, why is Al here sitting with my dad at 2 o'clock in the morning talking about just being down, at the FBI office?
No,
So
man, he's
that
trying to
was kind
save
of
his
one.
life.
Yeah, that was kind of one of the first maybe indications that maybe not, not every person had a grandpa who had these type of guys hanging around him.
Yeah.
And then when I got older, I was fascinated by two of my grandpa's friends that were twins, Jewish guys that were professional bettors. And I would ask my grandpa, because even some of these other guys, my uncle Al had or I shouldn't say my uncle Al Sandelman, they had businesses. They were booking, but they still were businessmen.
They had like legitimate business, but
Yeah. They did, but these two twins that were my grandpa's buddies, they were just straight up gamblers. And I remember asking my grandpa, what do they do? And he said, they're gamblers. I'm like, what do you mean they're gamblers? Like, you gamble, but my grandpa was also, owned an insurance company. I was like, what do you mean, like you, like they gamble like you? And he's like, no, they're professional gamblers. I was like, I don't know what that means. He was like, they put on their tax return. I was like, they file a tax return admitting that they make a living illegally gambling. So I
that's
was being
crazy.
fascinated as a 14 and 15, 16-year-old, being kind of fascinated by that. And whenever those guys would be around, I'd sit and just talk to them about gambling and betting and handicapping.
Yeah.
But sorry, this is a long answer to your question.
No,
But
it's all right, man.
but none of it was really of interest to me outside of those little interactions. So like we'd be at a dinner table and I'd hear a story about the Purple Gang and I'd laugh or I'd be interested for those 5 minutes that we were talking about it. But it didn't resonate past that as like something I wanted to research more or look into more. Or my
Yeah.
grandpa's friends, like there'd be a anecdote of one of them doing something crazy because they were a crazy bunch of guys. Or I'd go back to, I'd go to high school and I'd have been with them on a Saturday and I'd, go tell my friends on a Monday, oh, you couldn't believe what my grandpa's friend Bernie did. Uh, and I would kind of tell the story as if like these guys are, kind of on the fringes of the mob. But
Yeah.
again, it didn't mean much to me at the time. So the answer to your question is, when I was 23, 24 years old, I went to law school. And in my second year of law school, I was 24. I was, no, my first, end of my first year, 23 turning 24. I got a job working at the Illinois Attorney General's office in criminal prosecutions. It was an externship, which is kind of like an internship, but
Yeah.
it goes throughout the year instead of just a set period of time. So
you basically like shadowing
so
the
shadowing
prosecutor.
a unit was like a subunit of the prosecutor's office.
Did you
And
see any crazy cases while you were there?
yeah, so I started. You're kind of split. You spend some of your time with one unit, and then another. They give you kind of two sectors of the law to learn. And I had two kind of very different subunits of the Attorney General's office that I was assigned to. So my first handful of months, I was doing environmental law. So they were prosecuting guys that were dumping
Like
toxic waste.
oil and things like that.
Well, no, it was most of the work I was doing was like construction companies that would be illegally dumping their waste at certain um, black market black market landfills, stuff like that.
Yeah, it's like toxic waste.
Yeah,
The dirt is contaminated,
right.
like what they tried to do at the Big Dig.
Right, and they don't want to pay. They don't want to pay.
That.
They don't want to pay to dispose it of the proper way because it's very costly. So they illegally dispose of it, or just some case they just dump it. They just leave it in the woods somewhere.
I see it all the time, man. When I go for walks in the woods, you see piles of garbage everywhere. It's messed up.
Then eventually I got moved to a. So it was the Attorney General's office within the criminal prosecution division, and then my first kind of cycle through was with this environmental law team. And then I transitioned into organized crime, and I just from day one I was hooked.
Right when you started.
Right from the second I stepped foot into a meeting room, and they laid out on the board in front of us like it was like something from like an FBI interrogation room with all these pictures and like shoe ties that were like connecting all the pictures in like a pyramid shape. And I started helping them work Chicago Mafia cases. And I mean, I was the lowest man on the totem pole. I was going to get them coffee, but
what year was this?
So this was 2001, 2 ish.
That was in Chicago.
In Chicago, yeah, 2001, 2002, 2003. And I actually worked a couple mob murder cases. When I say I worked, again, I was present when the case was being worked by the Illinois Attorney General's. But getting to go out with the Cook County Sheriff's Department, which had a wing of their sheriff's department that was connected to the AG's office, and they would do all the investigative stuff. And I was assigned to these two, like a guy just out of central casting, two Chicago, old school Chicago cops. Probably both guys in their 50s at the time, and one was Greek and one was Polish and one was Italian, and they were like not like Barney Miller on steroids. And just going around, getting to do what they call door stops, where we went into areas around a couple mob murders. One that had taken place in '99. Ronnie Jarrett, who was killed in in Bensonville, and then the Tony the Hatchet Cheramonte hit from '01, which was out in Lyons Township. I went with them in the neighborhoods of where the hits occurred, and just
Yeah.
did, I would just go with them, and they would knock on everyone's door and be like, "Did you see anything? Can you tell us anything?" I mean, again, basic stuff. We weren't, I wasn't
Were they
interrogating
both shootings? The murders, both
Yeah, they were both.
shootings?
Tony the Hatchet was killed in a there's a fried chicken chain in Illinois called Brown's Chicken. That's a popular local fried chicken chain, and he was killed by a hit team. He was supposed to meet someone in the parking lot. He pulled his BMW in the parking lot. Hit team kind of came out shooting at him. He ran into the Brown's Chicken, and they got him in the vestibule before he, reached the safety. I guess he thought the safety of the restaurant. And then Ronnie Jarrett was killed on his way to ironically, on his way to a funeral, getting into his car right outside his house. Someone came in a truck and drove by and unloaded a clip into him.
Damn.
Ronnie
So
Jarrett.
there was a lot of organized crime.
That was really
Probably.
the last. Those were two of the last 3 or 4 mob hits Chicago's seen. Chicago was a very gangland slaying friendly environment there for a long time, and
Yeah.
it looked like that was going to continue into the 2000s with the Jarrett hit, which happened at the very end of '99, and then he died in 2000 after being in the hospital for a couple weeks. The Chiaramonte hit was in '01, and then there was a disappearance of the underboss Tony Zizzo, who disappeared in '06, and then
Never found them.
they've never found him.
Oh,
But
man.
he was caught up in the same power play as Chiaramonte was 4 years before that, or 5 years before that.
So it has
Um,
something to do with internal.
yeah, it was a divergence within the ranks of the Chicago Mafia, was specifically a divergence within one crew. The Cicero crew had been running things, and one Cicero regime was coming out of prison, while another Cicero regime was going into prison, and the changeover of power was volatile.
Yeah.
And you had members of both sides that ended up dead. And then there was a murder from I believe 9 or 10 of a Hispanic enforcer in the north side of Chicago in Wrigleyville. North side of Chicago was controlled by the West Side crew, or the Grand Avenue crew, and this guy's murder has been tied to that group. So there's been 4 murders in the 2000s, or 3 murders in the 2000s, but one guy that died in 2000 after being shot in '99.
So they're still operating, right?
Yeah, Chicago. Yeah, I mean, Chicago and Detroit are still operating,
Yeah.
as is New England and Philadelphia. Those are the 4 crime families that I report on. Yeah, so getting back to, I was working those cases in Chicago, and becoming kind of obsessed with learning the history of the mafia, and learning the history of my hometown, Detroit. I immediately wanted to start learning about all the stuff that I'd heard about from my family in Detroit, as well as just learn about stuff I didn't know at the time. And
Is
had a
there
professor.
a lot more than one family in Detroit, or is it like a whole bunch of different
No,
families?
Detroit. Well, Detroit's got, in terms of the Italian mafia, there's one family. The
Yeah.
Toccozerli crime family. Um, there's also a Middle Eastern crime family known as the Chaldean Mafia.
I
Uh,
think a lot of people out there, I don't think they understand that the mafia is like, it could be a whole bunch of different
yeah,
groups. It could be the Chinese mafia, it could be like
organized crime doesn't really specify
discriminate.
itself to
Yeah.
any ethnicity. I mean,
Yeah.
there's organized crime in every ethnic group, and a lot of
Yeah.
times those ethnic groups work together.
Yeah.
Other times they don't.
Yeah.
Uh, in Detroit, we have a Chaldean is an Iraqi Christian for people that aren't from this area in Detroit. Not a lot of people know what a Chaldean is. It just means someone from Iraq that is not a Muslim. So they're Catholic Iraqis. They have their own organized crime group.
Really?
As does
That's the first time I've ever heard that one.
yeah, and they're very, very rich and powerful and ruthless.
Yeah.
Have worked at various times in tandem with the Italian Mafia and in opposition to the Italian Mafia. There was a black mafia, doesn't really exist anymore, but the black mafia was a subset of the Italian Mafia, where the Giacalone crew had financed and backed a number of black racketeers. And then there is some semblance of Russian and Albanian organized crime, but I don't know how structured they are. But I do know that they exist, and they're vicious individuals, their reputation at least, and they're known to do muscle work.
I mean, there's Polish, German.
Yeah, but the Polish
right?
and German don't have an organization. If you're Polish or German, you're working with the Italian.
Yeah.
So yeah, so from that point on, I had a professor in law school that encouraged me to write about the law, because I didn't want to practice law. I wanted to kind of chronicle it and be a storyteller,
Yeah.
even though I was in the middle of law school. And I had a professor who happened to be a published author, and he put me in touch with a publisher, and I got a book deal when I was 27 or so, and my first book came out when I was 29.
Yeah, that's a big accomplishment, man.
Or 28, maybe 28, 29.
Especially back then when you didn't have the internet and all that.
No, the internet was still the internet was still.
I mean, in its infancy, you don't
Yeah.
have as much information as
Yes.
you do now. But I want to write a book, man. I'm working on it. I've been scribbling away. I mean, you can write a book about pretty much anything.
Yeah. It's a lot of time, a lot of energy. Like I said, I've written 6. 4 are traditional, 2 are ebooks. I might be starting on another one soon, but it's you definitely got to love it, because for the most part, I would say 99.9% of the time, you ain't doing it for the money.
Yeah.
Because the money really isn't there. I mean, like I said, I got 4 books. You can go into any Barnes and Noble in the country and go get one of my books that's on the shelves at any of those Barnes and Nobles. But ask me how much those monies, how much those books, how much money those books have put in my pocket. It's at the end of the day, it's like, slinging burgers at McDonald's.
Yeah. I mean, you
People
gotta
don't
have a
know that,
love.
though, dude. Bill, people don't know that. Everyone thinks that
No.
I've made millions of dollars off of writing about organized crime, and I'm just like,
I mean, people are interested. People are interested in that genre.
No, it's not that they're not. No, I'm not.
I mean,
I'm not trying to bash their interest.
have you
I'm
got a
saying
lot of book sales?
I'm saying when I get criminals that feel like I've made all this money off them, or that say to me, "Oh, you've made $1 million off of writing about me." I'm like, all due respect, don't flatter yourself.
Yeah.
Unless you're John Gotti or Whitey Bulger, or Al Capone, there's really not a ton of money or even market there to tell the stories that I want to tell. So I tell them because I think they're stories that need to be heard, and they're great parts of history, and they're fascinating tales to spin. But this narrative out there in some circles of the underworld, when people view me, whether it be guys from Philadelphia or New England or Chicago or Detroit, I just know a lot of them think I'm making a lot of money, and I'm not at all.
Yeah.